All right. Well, good morning and welcome everyone to this beautiful in my town. I'm in Roseville. Is a little breezy, but it's a beautiful spring morning. I hope everyone is doing well this fine Wednesday, and I want to welcome you to the April Research Administration Forum. We're so glad that you can attend with us today. There's a lot of items on our agenda this morning. Great information to share with you and go over some updates. So first I'm going to start with our Philip Barruel. Hopefully, Philip, I'm saying that correctly. He is our Biosafety Officer from the Environmental Health and Safety, and he has some updates that affect Cayuse.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to talk this morning about dual use research of concern. Let me share my screen. All right. So do you see my, my presentation? Awesome. So again, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about dual use research of concern. I'd like to give this presentation so that you'll have an idea as to, to what dual use research of concern is about. So just so everybody is on the same page, the federal government has had a policy for oversight for dual use research of concern. And what is exactly is, I'm going to call it DURC, D-U-R-C. What exactly is DURC? So the federal government has had a DURC policy for over 10 years. And back in 2014, it had a very narrow scope. They had a defined list of organisms that were covered. And so what they used to call it the tip of the spear thing. So if you look at all the research that's taking place, there's only a very small amount that would fall under this category. Last year, in May of 2024, the government updated the policy, and they said that they expanded that. I'll show it on a later slide. They expanded what is defined as dual use research of concern, and they included this other part called PEPP, or pathogens with enhanced pandemic potential. So how does that impact us? Here you see, Davis, all research that are conducted at any UC location that may involve DURC or PEP, so pathogens with enhanced pandemic potential, are covered in this policy. And because the federal government updated their policy, UCOP also updated the policy. And for the most part, the UCOP policy is almost identical with the federal policy, with one difference that I'll talk about later on in the presentation. So what is dual use research of concern? So by definition, DURC is it covers life sciences research that, based on current understanding, can be reasonably anticipated. And that phrase, reasonably anticipated, will come up again later on. But research that can be reasonably anticipated to provide knowledge, information, products, or technologies that could be misapplied to do harm with no or only minor modification, or to pose a significant threat to the public health, to safety, to agricultural crops, to other plants, animals, the environment, material, or national security. So basically, as our researchers do their work, it's obviously for good purposes to find a cure for this disease, or to figure out how this pathogen may be causing this illness for the purpose of addressing that kind of infection, those kinds of things. As that research is being conducted, if someone takes that information, they can then turn it around, even though it initially had the intention of for good. Someone can take that for bad intent. And that's the dual use. There's what is initially intended to do, and then there's a possibility if that research can lead to, if it can be reasonably anticipated to provide the knowledge, information, or product or technology that could be misapplied. It wasn't the original intent, but it could be misapplied by someone who then wants to do harm to others or to the environment. So that's what dual use research of concern, that's what the dual component is about. And as I mentioned earlier, back in 2014, when the prior version of the policy was published, it had a list of 14 organisms and one toxin. And those organisms were very much controlled, and they were subject to scrutiny by the Federal Select Agent Program. And not only that, it was not only select agents, but what's called tier 1, so like the most dangerous of the on the list, the most dangerous organisms on the list. Fast forward to last year, in May of 2024, the federal government expanded that to not just a subset of select agents, but all select agents and all select toxins. So they went from a list of 15 to over 60 plus organisms. But on top of that, they also added all risk group 4 pathogens listed in the NIH guidelines Appendix B. So what do I mean when I say risk group 4? So when we're talking about biosafety, there are 4 categorizations of risk groups. So risk group 1 are organisms that are not known to cause disease in healthy adults. Risk group 2 are organisms that can cause disease in healthy adults, but it's a limited infection, is not very severe, and your immune system usually takes care of it. Risk group 3 organisms are organisms or pathogens that cause disease in healthy adults, but it has a little more severe kind of illness. There may or may not be a cure. Risk group 4 are organisms that cause illness in healthy adults, and there is not likely a cure, and it's fatal for higher than the normal percentage of the population. So, for example, risk group 1 would be an organism like Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So, for those of you who make your own beer, this is your friend. Saccharomyces cerevisiae is yeast that is useful in beer making. An example of a risk group 2 organism is E. coli, salmonella cause kind of GI issues, diarrhea and whatnot. As we all know, it's terrible, but it's not the worst kind of illness. It will cause disease and discomfort, but you get over it after about a few days. Risk group 3 pathogen, an example would be Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the organism that causes TB, something like that. It's transmitted via aerosol, or could be transmitted via aerosol. An example of risk group 4 would be something like the Ebola virus, other kinds of viruses, what's called hemorrhagic fevers, Lassa virus, and things like that. There's not usually a cure for risk group 4 organisms. So the dual use research of concern added not only select agents, but risk group 4 pathogens listed in NIH guidelines Appendix B, and a subset of risk group 3 pathogens listed in NIH guidelines, also Appendix B. So we went from 15 organisms to 60 plus, 70 plus. And so what is the definition of reasonably anticipated? I mentioned earlier that it's going to come up again. And so the research experimental outcomes that are reasonably anticipated to result in any of the 9 following outcomes, and I'll outline those 9. But reasonably anticipated describes an assessment of an outcome that generally individuals with scientific expertise, so our research investigators, our PIs, would expect would likely result in a non-trivial outcome. So if as they're doing this research, if it's reasonably anticipated to result in information that could be misused for dual use, again, for bad purposes, then if a subject matter expert says, "Oh yeah, that has a non-trivial likelihood that that can happen," then that fits the definition of reasonably anticipated. And so, what are those 9 outcomes, research experimental outcomes that the federal government was talking about? So, if a researcher does research that it will increase the transmissibility of a pathogen within or between host species. So, if it makes it easier to transmit for that pathogen to go from one person to another. So if normally you have a 40% chance of getting a cold, for example, if they make it, or the flu, and I'm just making up a number, if they make it so that now it's 90% transmissibility, then that falls into this. If it's something that will increase the virulence of a pathogen, so meaning virulence means how severe it is, the illness that it causes, how it attacks the host, and how sick the host gets. If it's something that increases the toxicity of a known toxin or produce a new toxin, if it's something that increases the stability of a pathogen or toxin in the environment, if normally, for example, the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, has this ability about, it could be as short as a few hours to maybe a couple of days, depending on the condition and the kind of environment. If it's something that will make that organism persist longer in the environment and be continue to be infective for a much longer time, that falls under that definition of research experimental outcomes. If it's something that will alter the host range or tropism of the pathogen or toxin, so if it normally just makes, say, birds sick, if all of a sudden it has the ability to make also other animals like horses or cattle sick, then it's bad. It'll impact agriculture significantly. Is it something that decreases the ability for human or veterinary pathogen or toxin to be detected? So if it can be hidden, then that's another research experimental outcome. Is it something that can then increase the resistance of a pathogen or toxin from therapeutic intervention or prophylaxis? And then that's also something, one of the 9. Is it something that will alter human or veterinary pathogen or toxin to disrupt the effectiveness of pre-existing immunity? So, for example, we have vaccines for certain things. If the research that's being conducted will make it so that the organism will evade the vaccine, or make the vaccine non-effective against that organism, then that's one of the outcomes of the 9 outcomes. If it's something that will enhance the susceptibility of a host or population to a pathogen or toxin, that's something that one of the 9. So when it comes to DURC, category 1, there are 2 categories. So category 1, again, this has the defined list of organisms, albeit expanded from 15 to 70 plus, it's still the defined list. There are 3 steps to consider when looking at dual use research of concern. Is it one of the agents? Is it reasonably anticipated to result in one or more of the 9 research experimental outcomes? And then the third one is, does it fit the definition of dual use research of concern, which I've defined for you in the prior slide? So if it fits all 3 in order, one of the agents reasonably anticipated to result in one of the 9 outcomes, and then it fits the definition of dual use research of concern, then it's considered category 1, dual use research of concern. Category 2, dual use research of concern, is more on the other part of the title, the pathogens with enhanced pandemic potential, or PEP. what is PEP? It is a type of pathogen with pandemic potential resulting from experiments that enhance a pathogen's transmissibility, virulence, disrupt the effectiveness of pre-existing immunity. So a lot of what we saw in the 9 experimental outcomes that I'm fast forwarding here could have a significant threat to public health, capacity of health systems to function, or may impact national security. And so, again, the term reasonably anticipated comes into play. And category 2, there are, as opposed to 9 experimental outcomes, there are only 4 in category 2. So category 2 is kind of a new part of the DURC policy. So those 4 are on this slide. And it is that organism, that PEP, will it enhance transmissibility of a pathogen in humans? Will it enhance the virulence of the pathogen in humans? Does it have the potential to enhance the immune evasion? So if you're either natural immunity or pre-existing immunity or through immunization, if that research will enhance that pathogen's ability to evade that immune system in humans, then that's an experimental outcome that falls under category 2. Or the 4th one, is it likely to generate, use, or reconstitute or transfer an eradicated or extinct pathogen with pandemic potential or previously identified pathogens with enhanced pandemic potential? So I'd like to make a point here. When it comes to category 1, there's a list of organisms and toxins. When it comes to category 2, there is no list. It's you're taking something, a pathogen with pandemic potential, and if it will result in one of those 4, then that can fall into category 2, dual use research of concern. But like category 1 DURC, category 2 also has your 3 steps. You're looking at, is it a PPP? So does it have that potential? Is it reasonably anticipated to result in one of the 4 research experimental outcomes? And then if it is, the 3rd one is it reasonably anticipated to result in the development, use, or transfer of a pathogen with enhanced pandemic potential or an eradicated or extinct pathogen with pandemic potential that may pose significant threat, again, to public health, capacity of health systems to function, or impact national security? Then if the answer is yes to all 3, then it's considered category 2 dual use research of concern. So what are the responsibilities now? With the 2014 DURC policy, the responsibility started with the institution. With the revision from last year, the federal government changed the responsibility to now the first step is with the principal investigator. When the principal investigator is applying for a grant, they need to be knowledgeable and comply with DURC policies, both the federal and here UCOP policy. And this responsibility is by requirement of the federal policy. The PI is to assess the research for possible dual use research of concern inclusion into that policy, and comply with any DURC policies, extramural contract and grant terms, and conditions supporting their research. So, and this is why we're making the change in Cayuse, is because when the PI submits their grant proposal, then they'll be asked a question: does this research fall into category 1 or category 2 dual use research of concern? And then we provide a link to our webpage that will have that has information on dual use research of concern. The implementation date required by the federal government is May 6th, so our webpage will be updated on May 6th. The Vice Chancellor for Research is also responsible for ensuring compliance with UCOP DURC policy. This is by UCOP policy. And the Vice Chancellor for Research is to establish a local institutional review entity, or IRE. And at UC Davis, IRE is the same members as our Biosafety Committee. The Vice Chancellor for Research is also to designate what's called an institutional contact for dual-use research, or we call it ICDR. And so the ICDR for our campus is me. And then the institutional review entity, as I mentioned, we have that committee already. It has at least, by federal policy, these are the requirements. There are to be at least 5 members. We have more than that. It is to be empowered by the research institution to review those, the DURC, the dual use research of concern, and help make an evaluation. Does it actually fit that definition? The committee is to be knowledgeable about biosafety and biosecurity measures, knowledge on pathogens with pandemic potential and pathogens with enhanced pandemic potential and dual use concerns, and to be empowered to engage with the PI and help develop with the PI what's called a risk mitigation plan. So a risk mitigation plan is something that the PI entity will develop, and it is to cover, and the granting agency will also review the risk mitigation plan. And then if all parties are in agreement, it is something that will cover information like, how will the information be shared? Will the researcher publish everything as they normally do on the paper that they'll write? Likely the materials and methods section will likely be truncated. Will they readily share the materials that they generate? So they're working on an organism that they then develop to be recombinant to, and is now able to evade that treatment or that immunity. Will they share that with anybody to just ask? So usually researchers are willing to share their materials that they develop. When it comes to DURC, there's some control over that. Maintain records, provide DURC training, assign a NICDR. We have that in place. This flowchart kind of describes the process for dual use research of concern. All the way from the left, the PI makes assessment to notifying the federal funding agency. If the federal funding agency is planning on funding that grant proposal, they will then contact the institution and say, we're looking at this, move on with the next phase of evaluating DURC. And then the middle part with a big circle is kind of, it splits into category 1 and category 2. And all the way from the end on the box, on the green box on the right, where the PI has a finalized risk mitigation plan. They're continuing to evaluate their research to make sure that it doesn't, it doesn't add more things that will need to be reviewed, and so on and so forth. But again, the key point here is on the left, the PI is to start that, and hence our change in Cayuse. The second slide kind of expands on the PI responsibilities, and for the sake of time, which I'm running out of, I can share this presentation. I've shared it to Perry, so I can PDF it, or Perry can PDF it, and so you can see the presentation. And then this flowchart defines the institutional review entity process, and I won't belabor that. So what's the key difference between the federal policy and the UCRP policy? As I mentioned at the beginning, they're almost identical. So the almost part, the difference is that the federal policy applies to federally funded research. The UCOP policy takes that and says, we want to apply the UCOP DURC policy to all research, regardless of funding. And I think the reason for that is there is a caveat in federal policy that says, if a funding agency, if a federal funding agency requires all research at that institution to abide by federal policy, then the institution will have to abide by that. As far as I know, they haven't. No one has required that I've heard. But I think OP is just being proactive and saying, instead of mirroring federal policy exactly, let's just cover it, the scenario where a federal funding agency will say, oh, we want to make sure you're regardless of funding, that all the research conducted at UC Davis follows the federal policy. So we don't have to kind of backtrack and start all over again. I think that's why OP decided to put that in the OP version of the DURC policy. So what are the implications? We're providing PI training on DURC. Again, federal policy places the PI at the beginning of the process. And so there is, or will be available city training for our PIs that they can take. And Office of Research is making that available for our principal investigators. The other impact is our institutional review entity will have more to evaluate, because we're going from 15 to 60, 70 plus for category 1, and for category 2, there's no defined list, so it could be a lot more. So, these are what hopefully you get an appreciation for what dual use research of concern is about, how it impacts us, how it may impact you. And at this point, if there are any questions, I can entertain those.
Philip, in the chat, there was one about the PI training, and you talked about the city training. Is that going to be mandatory for PIs?
So our expectation is that if a PI says yes, and let me actually get out of this so I can show what the proposal, how Cayuse will look. If you can see here, number 6 is the new question. This is in the special interest section. If they answer yes here, does your project involve dual use research of concern, category 1 or category 2? And then we have a link to the Biosafety webpage on DURC. If they answer yes, then they will be required to have completed that city training. The other thing I'd like to highlight, another change, not at all related to DURC, but I was asked to talk about it, is we're also changing the hazardous research materials section of Cayuse. We removed the nanomaterials option here, and we put it in chemical hazards. Just as an FYI. I don't think it'll impact people here, but yes.
Philip, also on that screenshot, it talks about the standard operating procedures. That's a new line added.
Yes, that just points our researchers to resources where they can get help if they if they have hazardous chemicals that they need standard operating procedures for. If they need to write that, it shows them the resource for that.
And there's another question in the chat. Is there an informational email we can send out to our PIs about DURC?
You mean information about DURC?
Yeah.
We're planning on sending notice in our newsletter beginning of May about it. Maybe I can share that with you, Perry, and then that goes out to, that's called the CLSC, the Committee on Laboratory Safety. But I can share that with you, Perry, when it's published.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions for Philip?
Hi, I do. My question is, so looking at Cayuse, the question as it's laid out, to me, this is new, and with the question as it is, doesn't present enough information to clue a PI of what, especially new, brand new, what this subject is really about. I know you know what it is, you just explained it to us, but to me, there's not enough information as to what to clue them to say, oh, is this something I should be concerned? I could see just my experience with the PI going to go, oh no, I don't know anything about it, so it's no. So I don't know, for on the onset, I think that question needs to have just a little bit more added to it to clue what this new category or new requirements about.
So
besides the link?
as you may know, we're kind of space is limited in Cayuse, at least I'm told, and that's why we wanted to provide the link so that if they didn't know what it's about, that they will then go to our webpage and see the information on that. And I fully understand what you're saying, but we're relying on our PIs to that if they don't to look up something if they don't know what it's about before they answer yes or no. And it's an imperfect system, but
yeah, and I understand that. The problem for us is our PIs dump a proposal on us last minute, and we're just trying to get it out, and there's not a lot of time to investigate. So that's my concern with that, just to let you know.
No other questions for Philip?
Thank
All
you.
right.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Philip.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you. Next we have Petr Brym, our IT security manager in the IET office, or under the Office of Informational Security Office. He's here to provide some updates and information about the data classification.
Good morning. I apologize if my screen shakes a little, but I'll be showing a very brief PowerPoint, so hopefully that will be stable. I'm actually sitting outside of a building ready to walk into a meeting, so I'm in my car. I'm going to review briefly the most recent data classification seminar that we did for the campus, but I'm going to speak to it and how it relates to today's topic. So let me first share my screen and then we'll go from there. I need to move a couple things around here. Oh. Are you able to see my screen or not yet?
Yes.
Okay. Somehow I clicked on it. I don't want to, there we go. Here we go. Come on. I'm used to having external screens, so it's giving me a hard time. Here we go. Are you getting a clean screen now of the slide points?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So basically what we talk about with researchers, and a key point here is when we're even aware that a researcher needs help. And that's going to be kind of the key kind of questions and messages I have is, how can we work together so that we can help researchers in a more timely manner when it comes to data classification. So first of all, data classification, we classify data for its sensitivity according to the data classification standard that's published by UCOP or by UC in general. P1 being public information, P2 being non-public but not very sensitive, P3 being non-public and being sensitive. So for example, academic grades would be P3, or if a researcher is studying something about people, having their home addresses, that may well be P3 data, especially if they're participants who don't want somebody to know where they live. Maybe they're, maybe they are hiding from somebody that's been mean to them. And so some people consider their home address to be quite sensitive. It may not be notice triggering, meaning that if the address gets in the wrong hands, we may not be obliged by law to advise that person, but we might feel an obligation to do so if they're really sensitive about it. And then P4 is non-public and sensitive, and in particular, notice triggering protection is required by law. statutes, however you look at those terminologies. It could be federal law, it could be state law, California. It could be the law of another state. It could be the law of Massachusetts, could be GDPR for European privacy law, could be the privacy laws that China has, and others. So when we try to help researchers classify their data, we need to think broadly. We think beyond just the UC data classification standard. So I'm going to talk briefly about what considerations we look at when we try to classify data for researchers. And hopefully we'll get a little bit of time to talk about what might be the process. And I'll say we're at the sort of beginning of having a structured support program from the Security Office for researchers. Right now, we're in a kind of a transition mode, being responsive mode, where if we're asked to help, we will. But we're also starting to look at what are the research grant agreements that are in place to try to help researchers make sure that they're meeting their obligations for protecting information. But hopefully at some point, we're going to get ahead of everything, where we're going to get to talk to researchers before they even submit a grant request, so that they can be sure before they submit the grant request that they'll be able to protect the data according to the sponsor's requirements. So when we look at a researcher's data set and try to advise them about how sensitive the data is, we have to look at a variety of factors. The actual data elements, of course, plays a big role. A data element would be, for example, name, phone number, blood type, a particular gene, particular state of a gene on a chromosome. Those would be all data elements. And any one of those can skyrocket the data into the highest sensitivity category. So if you have a whole bunch of public information, but you also have the social security number about those people, then it's P4 data. So the actual data elements can make a huge difference. The data elements that this data set is associated with. We heard yesterday about one study where the researcher will have de-identified information. So on surface, that looks pretty low risk. But during the study, it'll be combined with data which will re-identify the data. So we really need to think about the journey that the data will be on while the researcher is doing the study. Source of information, where is it coming from? If it's coming from the federal government, if it's coming from an automotive company, maybe it's information about a part that the company manufactured, created, they're testing it here at UC Davis. Could be highly, highly confidential information about that part. And so may need to require all kinds of protection. Classification of systems used. So where is the data going to live? If you're going to take public information, but you'll store it in a P4 system, a system that requires P4 protection, that data takes on that characteristic, because you can't treat information in a P4 system as public because you could harm other data there. So that has to be taken into consideration. One of the really big semi-hidden components is whatever is in the agreement. So before a researcher is provided a grant, they may not have yet signed an agreement, but once they're offered a grant, they will have to sign some kind of an agreement. And that agreement will say what kind of protection is expected. And at that, I'm sorry, I just realized my lights went on. At that point, what could happen is that the researcher will realize they don't have enough infrastructure to protect the data. So it's prudent to try to get information about what will be required for data protection if a grant is going to be approved. And that could be difficult, but it's certainly worth asking. Non-disclosure agreements. Often there are additional agreements that have to be signed, and they may require certain types of protections. Location of the subjects. We mentioned GDPR. So we might have information about people. It might only be P3, but if it's about people from Europe, then that's P4, because we have to notify the European Union if there is a breach of that data. And then researchers' perception. So it might only be P2 data. So it might only be directory information. But if the researcher feels strongly that if this data gets in the wrong hands before they can publish, that their ability to publish may be compromised, then maybe we need to treat it as a higher, more sensitive data set, because the impact of a breach might be very high, even though the core classification might be low. Number of records makes a difference. Often we hear if it's 500 records or more, the classification might be higher, but it's not always 500. It could be 20 records. And so here we get into the it depends category. So often when we talk about research data about individuals, we consult with the Privacy Office. And I mentioned federal and state laws, and that would be listed usually in the agreement that the data will be protected according to, let's say, the California privacy law or the California medical privacy law, etc. I'm going to go to the next slide. So these are the data elements, and these are the types of things we would need to talk to a researcher about if they want us to help them classify their data before they submit a grant request. And certainly these are the kinds of questions we ask, even if they're asking us after they receive a grant, or even if they're in the middle of a study. If we're asked to help them classify, this is the kind of information we need to gather. And as far as the agreements go, we need to read the agreement so we can see what it says. Often the agreements will actually list a particular statute or a particular industry standard. They might say ISO 27701 or NIST standard or some other standard. One thing I want to mention without dwelling on it is that if the researcher is going to use third-party services, like they're going to store the data in Amazon, or they're going to have some company help them select the subjects for the study, or perhaps they're going to hire a third party to do statistical analysis for them, then a vendor risk assessment may be needed. And I just wanted to point out here that, it's typically referred to as the VRA, vendor risk assessment, and that this can take some amount of time. If we're lucky and the supplier is willing to provide information that's needed, the VRA may take 2 to 3 weeks. But if the supplier is not willing to participate or doesn't have the kind of evidence that we need, it could take longer than that. And so if a researcher is planning to submit a grant proposal, not only would it be prudent to classify the data, but it would also be prudent to ask, will they be using third-party services? Do they need to submit a vendor risk assessment? So just wanted to kind of keep that topic alive. We certainly are not asking for any more work. We get plenty of VRA requests, but it is a policy requirement from UC. And so we want to make sure researchers are aware of this. And it can be a real pain point for them if they realize after they sign a contract or after they sign an agreement to realize that a VRA is needed, because even if the VRA goes well, the VRA may find that the supplier is actually not equipped to support the researcher securely, and then the researcher's kind of stuck. So submitting a request for a VRA early in the process is a good idea. And for P4 data, the notice triggering data, that VRA needs to be done every year. For P3 data, like academic records, those kinds of data sets needs to be done every 2 years at least. I want to point out that when we help researchers, we collaborate with all of these different groups here. IRB, I'm sure you know what that is. We recently started a more formal relationship with the IRB to help look at requests. The UISLs, that's the Unit Information Security Leads. So each unit, major unit, has security folks or people that have a security function. And so we'll often reach out to the UISL for more information or to help us help the researcher. The Privacy Office, we speak with them multiple times a week, usually either by email or otherwise. And we also have regularly scheduled meetings. And often when there's a research request, we do consult with the Privacy Office. Now, the Privacy Officer, Zainab Shakur, also is the campus counsel. And so she will often switch hats right in the middle of the meeting, because a question might turn out to be more of a counsel question than privacy. But the good news is that we're not doing this in isolation. We do bring in these subject matter experts. If there is a need to contract for support from third-party services, we obviously work with procurement, especially when there is a need to modify the agreement with the third-party service provider. You all might have heard of the Appendix DS that needs to be attached to service contracts. Many companies don't like it, so procurement will often reach out to us for help on that. And of course, our office is the ISO. The one thing I didn't list here is the liaisons. Liaisons are folks in the ISO office that focus on helping units. And so Julio Cardenas is the liaison that's focusing on research. So if you're helping a researcher and help is needed from the ISO, chances are Julio Cardenas will be involved, but he also knows to pull in others like me or some of the other liaisons, or to consult with privacy, or to consult with the CISO. I did mention the vendor risk assessments. If a researcher is looking to use a particular service, we do have information available to all the unit UISLs about which VRAs have been done. And so if a researcher wants to use, who knows, maybe 1220 Inc., we do have a listing that's available to all the UISLs. They can look up when is the most recent VRA that was done. You can see here that for that one, it was done once in 22 and once February of 25. So there is a fairly recent VRA for that. So if that's what a researcher needs to use, they shouldn't just proceed with the purchase just because it says a VRA was done, but at least there's a VRA we can look at so we can advise the researcher. I want to talk a little bit about the process. I'm gonna stop sharing screen here as soon as I find a stop sharing button, and just want to talk a little bit about the process and see what questions there are. So let's see, stop share. There we go. So right now, if a researcher was planning to submit a grant proposal, and if they needed help classifying data, probably the best thing for them to do, if they needed help from the ISO, would be to simply send a request to cybersecurity@ucdavis.edu and tell us about their situation, tell us what they're requesting, and we'll route that ticket typically to Julio, and then we'll support Julio on that. I am hoping that down the road, as we start getting these requests, we can figure out a maybe more formal process, perhaps create a form for this. We really haven't been getting a lot of these requests right now. That may be partly due to lack of awareness that it would be good to start early, or perhaps there hasn't been a need. But if you all perceive a need for researchers to get their data classified before they submit a proposal, for the short term, I would say, have them submit a cybersecurity@ucdavis.edu request. It creates a ServiceNow ticket. We can route that to the right people. And then after we get a few of these, we're going to see what the cadence is, what kind of information we're able to get from the researchers, and probably create an intake form. We've done the same thing with the vendor risk assessment. We first were receiving just cybersecurity tickets, and then based on that experience, created a form. And we're also doing that for other areas where we create an intake screen where we gather information. For example, cybersecurity exception requests. If you need to be excused from some policy, we now have a form for that based on experience. So I want to see what questions there are. And I am doing another presentation at 9:30, so I'll probably have to stop in about 4 minutes.
So Peter, one of the questions.
Yeah.
Is there any cost associated with data protection services that should be added to the budget?
I think so. But there's really no magic number to give you, because it depends on what the data classification is, how long the data will be under study. Does the researcher need to keep it forever? Some researchers need to keep the data forever. Some can get rid of it at the end of that. So we would need to work with the researcher to see what they have in mind. But yes, absolutely. Because often researchers tell us, wow, okay, that's cool that I need to protect the data. It's cool that I need to encrypt it at rest. And then I need to have intrusion detection, but I have $0 for that. And so they're kind of stuck. Now, there is an effort on campus to try to spin up an environment where researchers could host their data. So it would already have some pre-created security measures. But even that might cost some dollars unless it's sponsored centrally. So yes, but how much? That's probably where you want to submit a cybersecurity ticket. And we can speak with the researcher to see if they have any information about what kind of security requirements there will be. So we can then advise them whether something like that's already available, or perhaps get together with the UISL of that unit. And often the UISLs can point to a resource that they have. Other questions?
Yeah, I received another question accidentally sent to me privately. Are there differences for health system-based studies or contracts?
I think the short answer is yes, in the sense that if you are associated with UC Davis Health, doesn't matter whether you're located on academic campus in Davis or whether you're located at some location in Sacramento or elsewhere. If you are either a UC Davis Health employee or you're part of one of the schools that the health has, then the request for support definitely needs to be sent also to UCDH. So let's use a concrete example. And we actually had one like that yesterday. A researcher who is physically located on the UC Davis campus is doing research, but is a UCDH employee. So that request for help is given both to the UC Davis Information Security Office, so the office that I work in, as well as we then forward it to Kevin Mazzone at UCDH. And I just spoke with him about that yesterday, and he reconfirmed, yes, that's the proper thing to do, because UC Davis Health has certain requirements that are above and beyond what UC Davis campus has. One of those might be HIPAA. Often UCDH has HIPAA requirements where the campus only sometimes has HIPAA requirements. And one of the key factors is going to be, where is the data coming from? If the data is coming from UC Davis Health, absolutely they need to be involved. So the best thing for the researcher to do is to say who they are, where do they work, where are they located, and that'll help us guide them on who all that needs to be contacted. Are there other questions?
Yep, another question in the chat. Where would we find the safe VRA list?
So you would, for today, you would talk to your unit information security, unit information, the security liaison, UISL. So each unit has its own. You could also just submit a VRA request to us, and we'll look at what your use case is and tell you whether there's a VRA that is already applicable. We're working with the communications team to see if we can expose this list to a broader audience without exposing it to the public. So perhaps put it behind CAS. But today you would talk to your unit's information security lead who has access to it. Every UISL has access to the list today.
Thanks. There's another question. Can you clarify under what conditions a VRA is required? Is it when storing P3 or P4 data?
Yeah, so P4 data that is going to be in some way stored, handled by, transmitted by, or where its security can be impacted by a third-party service provider. So typically an outside company or using some outside application. Yeah, that's a VRA is needed. So one of the most difficult ones is you're going to go out on the internet somewhere, you're going to download a open source software, and you're going to use that software. Well, that's coming from a third party. It might be coming from a consortium or somewhere else. And so a VRA is needed. Now, with open source, it's difficult to do VRAs, but we'll do our best. But if you're actually signing up to store your data in a cloud hosting service like Amazon, or you're going to be hiring a consultant, a third-party consultant to help you analyze the data, those all require VRAs for P4 for sure, P3 absolutely as well. P2 and P1, it depends, but P4 and P3 for sure. So I do need to rush to my next presentation, but if there are other questions, Perry, perhaps you could send me a summary. I'd be happy to respond. And if any of the questions that I tried to answer already, if anybody needs further clarification, happy to provide it. I'll just look for an email from you. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for your
I really
time.
appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.
All right. Lots of great information this morning, packed full. As we proceed, we're going to now go to the SPO updates for sponsored programs. Let me get my screen set up. Should all be able to see it now. So again, welcome and good morning. So this morning we're going to talk just a couple updates on the side for the proposals and the side for the awards. I want to update you on a quick update that we made to the PI eligibility request form known as Form 105, as well as quick reminders for Cayuse SP. On the award side, we want to show you how to verify the award status on your pending projects so that you can check to make sure where things are at. There seems to be a little bit of confusion. We want to clarify that information so you have the right information going forward. In addition, there's been some questions coming up with that we received from NIH regarding the RPPR report, progress report submission requests. So we want to go through those with you. With the PI eligibility request form, we added this section right here where it says this checkbox, this check mark confirms that I will obtain the necessary access in Aggie Enterprise for this project. This checkbox will automatically be checked unless the PI physically unchecks it. This is to give them information and a heads up that they need to click this link. And they need to make sure that when they click this link, they get the necessary access to Aggie Enterprise as a PI or a co-PI on the project that they're requesting the PI eligibility request for. This is to ensure that, again, they have access to that award through Aggie Enterprise and have the appropriate status and access to be able to review that award. So this is just a handy little snip of information so that they can go forward successfully in being able to access all of their award information. This form is located on our website here under the forms section, so feel free to check it out. Quick reminder for Cayuse, one of the things that we're noticing a little bit of inconsistencies on, and we just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, is making sure that we're entering the sponsor and prime sponsor information accurately. This information is extremely important and helpful, so when awards are transmitted to the Contract and Grant Accounting Office, that they are allocated appropriately when their accounts are set up in Aggie Enterprise for the appropriate either federal, state, nonprofit, for-profit organization designation. So it's really important. If you don't know or can't find the information, please feel free to reach out to proposals@ucdavis.edu and we'll be happy to help you in ensuring that if that sponsor is not there, we'll identify that we can use a miscellaneous sponsor code, and then once the routed proposal is received in our office, we'll work to ensure that we get the appropriate sponsor identified. And again, that could be for either section. That could be for the prime sponsor or the sponsor. And just a reminder, the only time that you're going to use prime sponsor is if you have flow through funding. So in this particular case, if we use this example, if the funds are coming from the National Research Foundation of Korea, and they're going to the University of Arizona, and Arizona is subbing to UC Davis, we want to make sure that that is captured. So we want to know where the actual funds are coming from, where it's flowing through, then it comes to UC Davis. If there's any questions about the funding, if there's multiple levels, because there could be more than just those two, please feel free to reach out to proposals@ucdavis.edu and we'll be happy to help you to make sure that that information is entered as accurately as possible so that we have a true reflection of where the funds start and end. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Michael, I believe you're saying regarding the University of Arizona, is anyone else experienced delays on subawards, materials, forms? Is that specific to a subaward that you're working on, or that we can have a sidebar conversation?
Yeah, it was just a sidebar conversation, but just in general, We have several sub-awards that are working with University of Arizona, and I hear that they are very much delayed on their end. So I was just wondering if anybody else, if you heard, Chris, if anybody else is experiencing delays from the University of Arizona.
Other than we've heard that several organizations have been impacted and staffing is an issue. So that very well could be what the delay is, trying to, with the workload that's coming in and a lot of the additional administrative work that we're all doing due to the new administration in the White House with the executive orders. It takes a lot of time, and there's unfortunately sometimes precedence over some other items that could be pending. So that could be a delay, but I'm just speculating. I haven't heard directly from them or representatives of Arizona.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so then I will turn it over to my colleague, Alyssa Bunn, who will go over awards.
Yes, hello. We wanted to go over a couple things in awards to help you. First of all, we had some questions come in our office about awards that are obligated but still in pending status. So we wanted to go over how to check to see if an award is finalized in sponsored programs. Here's a Cayuse SP quick reference for accessing awards. So you would either go to My Awards or Awards in My Unit, depending on how you usually access your awards, and click on one of the two. And then from this page, if you're looking at your list of awards, you can see that some are pending and some are active. So if you go here and you see one is still pending, that means it's still in sponsor programs for one reason or another. It could be that there's some compliance missing, or there's something that's, pending negotiations with the sponsor. So that's the point where you could reach out to your assigned analyst for that particular record and check and see what the status is or what the probable timeline for going forward. All right, so and here's some more details on that. It's not going over to CGA until it says active in that column. All right, then we want to talk about NIH RPPR progress reports. A lot of these are going to and I see I made a typo too, awards at UC Davis. So spell Davis right when you email us. But if you want to find out who to put on your cover page or who's available to submit your RPPR if it needs to be submitted by SPO, then please reach out to awards@ucdavis.edu to go ahead and find out who's available to submit your report. And we ask that you do this at least 24 hours before so we can adequately assign to somebody that's available. Please do not put Denise on the cover page of your RPPR and forward to her, because it should be going to a SPO analyst who's available. Most PIs for most NIH RPPRs can submit directly to NIH. So this is just for some mechanisms and NIH sets up for SPO to submit. And so we can help you with that. All right. One more thing I wanted to add that I, as an ad hoc topic, is that, and this kind of leads into CGA's announcement, in that the administrative contact on the Cayuse SP project level feeds over into Aggie Enterprise. So if you have people that leave your department, the awards associated with those are not going to go over to CGA appropriately. So you could reach out to the Cayuse help desk if you need to update, remove that administrative contact or update, right? Terry, maybe you can talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So all you have to do is just send me an email to the help desk, and what I'll do is I'll generate a report and send it back to you showing what the current projects are. And then you could just mark who they should be reassigned to and send it back to me, and I'll add it to the queue. And then I'll let you know as soon as it's done.
And then this will help all your correspondence and your awards, end up in the appropriate place.
Alyssa, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
In Cayuse, when you were talking about, checking award status, Could you explain what the difference is between the awards section and the active, I think it's active projects tab? There's like two different tabs.
Yeah. So you have a project, your project is active as soon as it's created. It wouldn't be inactive unless there's like it closes out or there's absolutely no actions under it. So the project is active as soon as we have a proposal, right? It just means there's a project and there's something under it that's, you know, not closed out. So that's going to be active regardless of even whether it's awarded or not. And then each individual award line, that could be like your first award, your amendment, your no cost extension, those each have a status as well. And so each of those transactions would also need to be active to go over to CGA.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question about the exception to PI form and having access to the Aggie Enterprise. I just submitted a proposal yesterday and I realized it was not that current form. So do I need to retract it and re-sign everything?
No, you do not need to retract it or change the form. You could go to the form and click on the link so that you can send that link to your investigator so that they have that information when you receive a signed approved PI eligibility form back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. And so if there's no other questions, I will turn this over to now Nicole Tardiff as the Contract and Grant Director of Contracts and Grants Accounting.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to address the question in the chat first, as it is one of the items on my list. And so somebody asked regarding the NIH not sending payments out, and is that correct? So what I will say is the way the federal draws used to go is we would submit the request for the money, and within a couple days we had the money. The way it is going now is we submit our request and they take a long time to think about it and analyze it, because one of the executive orders now requires that there's like these 3 layers of review before they can actually approve our payment. So what they now have done is required us to provide justification line by line on the purpose of the funding. We've submitted them last month. We received payments. We submitted them this month. We have started to receive them getting kicked back to us, asking us for more information, more specific project by project. So that is, it's not that they're not sending payments right now. It's just that they are being hypercritical of everything that we submit. So that said, we don't know when our resubmit is going to happen. We don't know what the requirements are going to be for us to be able to resubmit. We're still working through that process. There's discussion that we may actually need more detailed project information for each project that we have to request draws for. So if you have salary funds and materials and supplies, we may have to reach out to the departments and say, please tell us how this person was needed for this project. And you will have to now provide us with justifications if that's what the government is asking of us, because we don't have that information. So what I will say is this is kind of a pending situation. We're still working through it, and we will know more after we try our resubmit. So I don't know, stay on the line for that one. The next item I have is we are looking at getting a new ERS system. So I don't know how many of you are experienced with the effort reporting system and how tedious it has been and complicated. But we are in talks with other institutions in the California system to kind of jump on the bandwagon to look at some various other options out there. What we know is the current system will no longer be supported, I think, at the end of this year. So no matter what, we need a new one, but we're hoping to move a little faster so that way it's a little less painful next time that comes around. And then the third item we have is we have a new AR report, and Stephanie Mata is on here. She's going to run you guys through how to use the report, where to find the report, and answer all those fun questions. So now I'll let Stephanie take over.
All right, good morning. I'm going to be sharing my screen and doing a walkthrough in Aggie Enterprise, and we'll talk through the report. Okay. All right, so within Aggie Enterprise, here's our home screen. We're going to go to the reporting dashboard. And we're actually going to go into this financial reporting center to locate the report. And there is a KBA on this, and I'll provide that in the link. So this is a new report that we've developed. It's called UCD Sponsored Project Receivables Report. So this report is going to show us invoices only for the sponsored projects. And so if we click on this, and you can set this as a favorite over here. And here we have our different parameters that you can run the report. And please note that this does default to outstanding yes, which would give you only the invoices that are unpaid. But there is an option to see all invoices if they're unpaid or if they have been paid. So no, there's no balance, or the balance is zero, which means no. But you can run this by your award organization. We typically run for CGA, we typically run it by award number. So you will be able to see all the invoices for the award or the contract. So contract number, award number are the exact same number. So I have a sample of this report already downloaded, so I'm going to share that. All right, so just a couple columns I want to call out. Let me take off this filter here. All right, so this is our normal headings here. So if you did have parameters, you would be able to see that up here. And then each of the columns as we go across are pretty self-explanatory, but I do want to call out the award number is in this column here. And then way over to the far right-hand side is where we start seeing the invoice number and the amounts and the payments. So what this report is showing is the amount that was invoiced. It is showing the payment amount. If the invoice was adjusted within PPM, and also then if we had any credits applied, that for instance, if we reversed an invoice, then you would see a credit here. And then the amount due. And then we also have added the payment date. So if a invoice has received multiple payments, this should be reflecting the most recent payment. And then there's an aging here as well. And this will be the aging based on the date of the invoice, regardless if it's been zero balance as we're seeing here. So it's just the aging. And then we have a few columns over to the far end of the report. These are for CGA use. This report was initially created for CGA, and then we've enhanced it to be able to be useful across campus and CGA. So we've left data on here that is for CGA's primary use. But this report, if I'm going to show an example of, if we look at one award, we'll take a look at what that looks like. Let's see. All right, I'm not sure why filtering will not turn on. Let's see. Interesting. There we go. All right. So again, looking over here, here's our invoice numbers for this one award. And then our invoice amounts, and then payments, and then any outstanding balance. So we wanted to share this to show, we've developed some things. We do have a lot of questions about, payments for our invoices. There are other screens within Oracle that you can see them, but here we're trying to provide a one-stop place to look at all of the invoices for an award and then that activity. And if there's any questions about the report or something is broken, please reach out to CGA and then we can take a look at what's happened with hopefully it doesn't break. A lot of the reports, when there's a lot of data in it, sometimes they become a little touchy. But this is a new report, so hopefully it will stay stable. This is our KBA on the report. Like I said, I will put it into the chat for the meeting so that you can see the link of how to run the report, and it does talk about the columns as well.
Stephanie, there's a question in the chat for you. Will you touch on grant receivables on the default project?
Yes. So the default project, so the AR, what you're seeing, the account number, I believe, is 122401, which is the receivables. That would be representative of invoices that are unpaid. So that would be these. They do not carry a project number because one invoice could have multiple projects. Because again, it's based on your award that could have multiple projects. So the determination, or when the accounting strings, and it was decided not to carry the project number. So you will be seeing those in your department account. And it is quite correct for it to have a default project. There's also another account number, I think it's 122402, which is unbilled, and that represents expenses or activity that has not been billed yet, but will be billed. And those balances will clear. So it first shows up in your unbilled. Once we bill it, it clears your unbilled and it becomes the receivable. Once payment's received, and the receivable is cleared. There is discussion potentially changing that chart string. Instead of your department, it will be to CGA. So then you wouldn't see that activity in your department. The thought was to give visibility, but now the visibility it's causing some confusion. So we're just trying to decide, what is the best way or the best route. So, but there is a KBA on those as well. This is the KBA for the project, or the AR report. But here in our KBAs, let's see, where is it? PPM accounting. These two accounts here is where you're going to see that the default project. And so we talk about that in here a little bit.
Stephanie, another question for you. Is the payment accounting date the paid date?
It is the date that's from our accounts receivable module. So it's the date that the payment was applied to the invoice.
And another question, how do we access the default report for our department?
For the default project, that would be at the ledger, because it's not, so this AR report is your invoices. This is where you would, if you wanted to see, so CGA is responsible for collecting on these. But again, there's a lot of questions of what's been invoiced, has payment been received, and that's what we want to give this visibility to here. When you're running the report, this here is what you can use if you wanted to see it by a department. But this is only for, again, PPM invoices. And yeah, these would not, the default project string is at the GL, not from PPM. So again, all the activity occurs in PPM and then post to the GL. Same thing with our AR module. Payments, invoices, it's all created in the subledgers, and then the accounting behind it posts the GL. So if you're looking for activity or reporting to, want to see what's happened, I recommend coming to PPM, running your project costs there. If you're looking for accounts receivable, you would want to do that in the module. I would not suggest working from the GL because that's not giving you all the detail that you would want to see.
So some questions are arriving in the chat. And one of them is, can you post the link to the KBA, please?
Yep, doing that right now.
Harry, that invoice in question is important, right above from Jessica.
Stephanie, can you see the inbox or should I read it to you?
Yes, I'm trying to find which one.
I'll just
Okay.
read it. It says, is
Okay.
C&G now invoicing on awards automatically, or is the ticket still needed to be submitted for an invoice to be created and sent to the sponsor?
So CGH is responsible for invoicing our awards on a regular basis. Again, with the transition to Oracle, as we all know, it's just, we're all learning still and, working through the reporting, how to find everything. So if you're seeing something that is not invoiced, then yes, please submit a ticket, but we should not be, well, Nicole, maybe you should be answering, but I would think that we should not be relying on you to tell us when to invoice, unless that's a special type of award that the department is telling us how much to invoice. But
Yeah, that's
yeah.
correct.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. And then to add to that, we are actually working on creating a report that will help our invoicing process. So we'll be able to tell when the last time was invoiced, to determine if it's a quarterly invoicing, when it needs to get invoiced next versus monthly invoicing, or we have, some yearly invoicing. So we are working on that as well. So that way it should become a smoother process. You should not have to tell us. However, if you do notice that there's something missing, definitely poke us, because there's clearly a problem, and something slipped through the cracks, but we should be picking up on those on our own.
I'm not sure if another question was answered. Lenora answered yes to a question. We bill the sponsors based on the PPM, correct? But then there was a follow-up, and there's 100% alignment. There are no rogue expenses posted only on the GL that I have to reconcile.
So the rogue expenses, if these are the ones that are posting to your default project, that means something along the way from a boundary system went wrong. And those we will not see because they're not in PPM. So we are invoicing expenses that are posted to the project in PPM. So if you've got some rogue expenses on the ledger, you would need to take to see, you would run a transaction detail. And there's 2 different reports out there that you can run the transaction detail report to see where that expense came from. And if it is from a boundary system that cannot be corrected, then you would need to submit a cost transfer. And it would be a GL to PPM cost transfer.
And the person who asked that
Provide
question,
the report for that so I can look it up. My suspicion is that there's expenses sitting on the default because they were supposed to have posted in PPM, but they didn't.
Yeah, so there's different, so if it's a salary UC path issue, you might have to go back to UC path, but go back to the reporting dashboard here.
So there's definitely salary. I've been clearing up the activity codes 9900000102. I'm just worried about other outstanding like supply purchases that are just sitting.
Yeah, so there's different reports that you can run. These are in the reporting KBAs, or it talks about the different reports. You could run this GL summary, but this is for fiscal year at a time. So if you want to run a summary for this fiscal year, you can use this report. These transaction listing reports show the details. So if from Kowali, we had a DS2 report that would list all of the transactions from the GL, that's what these would show. They do take time to run, so I suggest scheduling them. But when you go into these reports, you can put in your financial department and then put project. You can do the default project. And that would give you all of the activity to a default project. If you had, specific fund segments that you wanted to use, such as the, like federal awards, what are they down here? The 2000 series, 20,000 series here would be your segments for sponsored projects.
All right, I need you to dumb this down for me just a little bit. So should I be searching in transaction listing report? Because I'm just searching for transaction in the catalog and I don't know where to go.
So if you go back out to the main screen of Oracle,
okay,
it's go to the reporting dashboard.
Okay, no, I don't think I have that. I have Financial Reporting Center. Oh, Reporting Dashboard. Got it. I haven't used this before. I'm sorry.
And then in here, the transaction listing reports are right here.
Okay, and then which one would you recommend for the transaction listing report? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, this one or the GL subledger detail, it gives you much more detail. This one tends to roll up activity. So if it's the same chart string, same activity, it rolls it up. Either one, I mean, I would maybe use this one here, the GL subledger detail, because it's going to give you all that detail. But again,
Okay,
the
and so-
reports, and then on this too, you'll want to put in a date range. Up here is your date range. You may want to run the GL summary balance report first to see where there's some balances, and then take that chart string and put it into this report. So that way you're not running it so wide open, and you
Okay.
can qualify it down to smaller, set of information.
So, Nicole, with all due respect, I'm just asking this question. When we received the email, or our PIs received the email saying that the reconciliation with the conversion from Quali to Oracle was complete, did it factor in this data, like the GLPPM realignment? Or do we need to do it individually?
All that migration cleanup involved was invoicing that occurred outside of Aggie Enterprise. So we had to create manual invoices because we could not submit them through the system. And so now those invoices have been entered into the system. That is all the migration cleanup managed.
Okay. So then the rest of it it's definitely on us.
I don't know the specifics.
So
So
I've
that
had this
I couldn't tell you.
question as well, and so I met with Stephanie and Mario, and I think the idea is that it's being figured out. I don't know if it's the departments that should be doing the GL reconciliation for sponsored projects. So I think there's conversations happening, but I don't know if there's an answer right now.
Yeah, well, it's twofold, right? It's both of us. However, these are posting to a default project, so we would not see that.
Right.
And as a department, I believe it is the department that would be monitoring their department accounts. But these are posting to a default project, so CGA would not know of these.
Okay, so thank you. That's actually really helpful. I'm just point of reference. I'm new to Davis, but I came from UCSD, where we also converted to Oracle. And years later, we found out about the default report and the misalignments, and so it ended up being millions of dollars worth of funding or worth of expenses that didn't post to the funding because there was a GLPPM misalignment. So that's just like the scary memory I have, and forms and having to manually make sure that we duplicate everything that's on the PPM because things were just completely, they were only posting on the GL. And it was just a scary, scary time. I have some grants that I'm about to close out, and so I just want to make sure that I capture all the expenses.
I just want to jump in here to let everyone know that we have, for the first time in my history, exceeded our hour-and-a-half time slot. So if you want to jump off, feel free, but we'll keep this forum going so that these last questions can be answered. So, Chris and Alyssa, there's a question that Stephanie Farver has posted in the chat. She's hoping awards can talk about the notice received from SPO about the temporary pause.
The temporary pause in NIH actions?
Yeah.
UCOP is reviewing some executive orders, and so they've asked us to temporarily hold NIH actions for now, all new ones. It's the only information we have at this time. Not proposals, just awards.
And then I see a question in the chat. Is it possible to revise final financial reports due to PPM misalignment?
I think it would depend, and you should reach out to your contract administrator. Because it could be that we don't have access to draw any more funds. I'm answering on the revenue team, but
Yeah, I was trying to see if we had anybody from that team on here, but I can't tell. However, that's the appropriate response. So you're going to want to reach out to your CGA person for your project. They'll be able to tell you. I do know we've had several projects that they've closed on the federal side, and then we've had to try to request, and the government does not like to reopen those projects. So it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
If you do have additional questions for CGA, we do have office hours today that started at 10.
There's a question, does CGA prefer communication through email or through the ticket system?
I mean, I personally prefer email because it's more direct. That said, I know there are certain tasks that have to be submitted through the ticket system because they are tracked. So if it's a direct question, I would say send an email. If it is, I need to extend the date or I need to move money, that would be a ticket.
If you already have a ticket for your problem, please do not send email on the side. We like to keep all the information in the ticket so everyone who looks at it can see all the information up to date.
so Ruby asked about non-sponsored. You would want to probably go to the office hours and go to the non-sponsored group to ask your question. CGA doesn't manage non-sponsored projects.
Okay, then. Are we done? Everyone have their questions answered? I think we are done. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you at the next forum, if not before.
Thank you. Have a great day.